Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 5.27... world.
Nice. Welcome back to Ellipses World. It's so weird. We just finished recording the creepypasta episode, so now, ellipses are a cursed thing to me, and every time I see them, I'm getting upset. And I can already see them a couple times. But, yes, we're here today with the Aetheral Space continuation. Last time, Akamento, was fighting Skipper, but then he fucked off to go bother them down below. What else was going on?
And then Lily brought down a huge bolt of lightning to blow everything the fuck up. And Jagran was using his new technique that he's been alluding to.
Oh yeah, Gemini World! I'm excited to see what Gemini World is. Is it a reality marble?
We'll find out, surely.
It's as toony as it gets. We've reached, level 8 on the toony scale. It was a strange experience to look at the world without eyes. To Jagran Hadrian, it seemed as though the environment had been frozen in the very instant he'd activated Gemini World, and each time he moved from his initial position, even by the slightest centimeter, that world seemed to blend together like a melting watercolor, mixing into a bizarre kaleidoscope that quickly abandons coherence. Even the slightest twitch of his eye reduced the entire world to chaos. Akamento in front of him and Lily beside him became crude smudges of vague color, the throwing knife frozen in midair degenerating into the most indistinct silver line. The ground mingled with the sky above, and the sky above was seeded with the impressions of the lightning that was coming down. Even these abstract sensations weren't consistent. They changed second by second, relentlessly. Jagran didn't have eyelids right now. He couldn't even close his eyes to escape the churning colors. Nausea rose up in his stomach that didn't currently exist. What are he, like astral projecting?
We'll see.
Gemini World. Before right now, actually using it had always been nothing but a hypothetical. Jagran had always been fully confident it would work, of course. He'd successfully used a prototypical version to save Ruth back on Corin, and Akamento was clearly doing something similar. But he had no reference to draw on in terms of what the actual experience would be like, how it would feel to record your own body. He had no eyes, he had no mouth, he had no ears, he had no brain. How strange it was to stop existing as yourself so suddenly. Did those things not get recorded with him?
Well, it's recorded, so they're not there.
Oh. How strange it was to stop existing as yourself so suddenly. Within a single instant, he'd gone from a flesh-and-blood organism to information recorded in his own aether. Jagran vaguely wondered how exactly his consciousness was still functioning like this. For that matter, was his consciousness still functioning? Maybe this was all some kind of neural illusion, an extended hallucination he was having while he faded away into nothing. Jagran didn't quite understand quite why he was having such bizarre thoughts. Maybe it was a result of the lack of stimulus. No new information was streaming in, so the only recourse for his mind was to cannibalize whatever data was already present. He wasn't especially sure how long he could last like this without going crazy. Could he cancel Gemini World yet? From what he'd observed... Oh, is this just making himself invincible? Is he vanilla icing?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Could he cancel Gemini World yet? From what he observed from the original explosion, it should only last a couple of seconds. Did he not take Lily with him? Is she just dead? Oh, okay. So, why doesn't he see her in his, recorded world?
Because he can't see anything. He doesn't have eyes.
Oh, right. He couldn't imagine this huge blast being much slower than that, at least for the epicenter. I imagine the only reason he can, make all this work is because he's epic cogitant, right? I feel like you would just be trapped if you recorded yourself normally.
Yeah.
It should only last a couple of seconds. He couldn't imagine this huge blast being much slower than that, at least for the epicenter. Even knowing that didn't do much to help him. In this state, he had exactly zero methods to actually discern just how much time had passed. He had no heart to beat, he had no lungs to breathe, he had no skin to feel. Just like his vision, time started to blend together into an indistinct mess. He should have been counting in his head from the beginning, but he'd been careless. All he could do now was trust his intuition. He'd been thinking these bizarre thoughts for a while now, so enough time had to have passed, right? There was no choice. He couldn't take another second of this hell. Like he was taking a greedy gulp of air, Jagran opened himself up and began existing again. The first thing he noticed was the scent of burning smoke. He noticed that before even registering that he once again had the organs necessary to smell. Immediately, he collapsed to the floor in a crouching position. He'd reappeared nearly a meter above his original position, leaving him floating in the air for a split second after he reappeared. It was the same for his +1. Lily, he fell in a heap next to him.
Who?
Wait, what? I was going to say, who fell in a heap next to him. She fell face up, electricity crackling around her hair as she panted for air, staring up at the sky. A line of vomit ran from the corner of her mouth. "What the hell was that?" she breathed, body shaking violently. Jagran had filled her in on the basics of how Gemini World was supposed to work, but he supposed that was no substitute for actually experiencing it. He couldn't act like he was reacting to it any better, either. Waves of a sensation like nails against skin were pulsing through his entire body, sending him into a similar shivering fit. His body wasn't used to not existing. What an absurdity. Jagran tried to laugh, but all that came out of his mouth was a bizarre choking sound. Still, it had been a successful test run. Recording his own body using Aether, even if the side effects made it somewhat excruciating right now, he could imagine the ability to disappear and reappear would become very useful if he could master it. With a jerk of sudden effort, Jagran forced his head upwards to look at the environment. Things had changed since he'd taken himself and Lily into Gemini World. The swamp was all but unrecognizable. Lily's last attack had done its work well. No trace of the fog that had swirled throughout the swamp remained. All of it had been burnt away in what had clearly been a truly gargantuan explosion. Instead, a charred wasteland spread out unimpeded in every direction, with only the occasional husk of a smoldering tree to break the monotony. The stench was unbelievable. A few months ago, Jagran could have proudly said he didn't know what burning humans smelt like. He couldn't say that anymore. With another grunt of effort, he forced himself up to one knee. Control of his body was quickly returning to him. He wasn't exactly in tip-top shape, but that was an unrealistic expectation at this point. Ignoring the occasional pinpricks of pain that swam over his face, he turned towards Lily. "Can you move?" he grunted. Electricity was still crackling around her, and her hands were still shaking violently in the mud, but she nodded all the same. "We need to get out of here," she rasped, one hand on her throat. "There'll be no survivors."
No, there will be survivors.
Oh, there'll be survivors! My bad. Sorry, I'm still out of it from that reading from before. That really took a lot out of me for some reason. Jagran raised an eyebrow. He didn't doubt that, but in this situation, he imagined any survivors from the enemy would be busier dealing with their own losses than pursuing the two of them. His gaze slid over to the tunnel Bruno, Serena, and the rebels had escaped to, or at least where the tunnel had been. The entrance was completely covered in rubble, inaccessible from this position. If Jagran had known for sure just how deep the thing was filled in, he could have tried to put together a plan to clear the blockage, but without that information, they couldn't risk just sitting here and working on it. They needed to find another way out of this former swamp as soon as possible. He returned his gaze to Lily, who had finally managed to get up on her feet, and quickly followed suit. The legs supporting him felt like jelly, but he supposed that was the best he could hope for under the circumstances. Wasn't there? Never mind. I feel like I'm deja-vuing a little bit on that line. All right, he breathed. They should still be trying to recover from what we did. If we hurry, we can sneak through what's left of them and...
How dare you?
Oh, right. Jagran didn't even bother whirling around this time. Before that thought could even cross his mind, he was struck in the back with a fist like a sledgehammer and sent sprawling back onto the ground, face in the mud. That was when he had time to whirl around. Or the equivalent in this case, which was pathetically rolling over in the dirt to face the threat. Akamento, of course. What was left of its cloak was a smoldering wreck, smoke still drifting up into the sky from it, and underneath, the red and blue bodysuit it wore clung tightly to its thin, angular body. Is he angry because Jagran just did the thing he's been doing, being an Aether being?
So it's the same kind of stand as Starflyer.
It's the same kind of stand as Akamento. The eyes behind its cracked mask were blazing blue, so bright that they almost hurt to look at. Red and blue Aether crackled sporadically around its entire body, flickering in and out, but most prominently around its hands, giving them the power to act despite the entity's obvious injuries. In this case, that act was gripping Lily by the throat. Akamento hunched over as it reached down to strangle her.
How dare you!
It repeated. Unlike before, there was no trace of rage in its voice. Simply an unsettling tranquility, with the undeniable intent to kill bubbling just under the surface.
How dare you! How dare you!
He had to do something. If the two of them were going to make it out of this, Jagran had to act now! He reached deep inside himself, to that place of firm self-determination where his Aether lived, and pulled it forth, letting it flow through his exhausted nerves. Blue Aether began to weakly run over his skin. Akamento was still speaking, its voice echoing through the burnt wasteland.
How dare you! Do you realize what you have done? You have taken the body of a noble, divine, perfect being, and utterly disgraced it. There is no redemption for what you have done. There is no forgiveness. Kill you, I'll kill you.
There was no time to charge his Aether up as much as possible. He had to act now or they'd lose. Jagran kicked off the ground, ignoring the screaming pain from his legs. He'd get in as quickly as possible and somehow try to shove Akamento off of Lily. If he did that, there was a chance she could use her own guardian entity to launch a proper counterattack. It wasn't much of a plan, but under these circumstances...
This is definitely a deja vu now.
They couldn't exactly hope for any better. He lunged at Akamento with all his strength, only to be interrupted as a pair of skeletal claws were speared right through Akamento's back, exiting through its chest. Immediately the guardian... Oh, I don't think so. Immediately Immediately the guardian entity released a Lily on reflex, and she dropped to the ground, spluttering for breath. Jagran adjusted his course, instead skidding to a halt in front of her, aether crackling around him as he faced Akamento. If it came down to it, he could fire off whatever Gemini shotguns he had left as a defensive measure, but in his heart he felt like that wasn't necessary. The presence of the figure perched on Akamento's told him that without a doubt. Ruth Blaine was grinning as she clung there, claws stuck deep through Akamento's body, holding firm as it writhed and screamed in response to the attack. Red blood poured freely out from around the claws, splattering to the ground. The crimson aether that raged around her and ignited her hair was by far more radiant.
"Release me!"
Akamento roared, trying in vain to reach the girl on its back.
There are two paths, you miserable pieces of shit!
And with that, it flickered out of existence, replaced by a sparkle of red and blue aether that faded after a moment. This time, Jagran wasn't sure it would be coming back for the time being. Ruth dropped to the ground, claws landing in the swamp water, the blood mixing into the liquid. I feel like this could be a little bit better if you made it hyper-realistic blood, but I don't know. Despite the situation, Jagran couldn't help but feel his lips curling into a smile. "Took you long enough," he said. And popcorn.
Bruno went to turn back as the explosion echoed, but Serena took control, resuming their crouching march through the tunnel. They were surrounded by darkness on all sides, with only the faintest impressions of the frightened rebels visible as they scurried through the dirt. But that was no obstacle. With their eyes properly infused, Bruno and Serena could move through this place as easily as a brightly lit room. "What are you doing?" Bruno asked angrily. "We can't just leave them." "Yeah, we can," Serena mumbled, ignoring the funny look from the rebels around them.
"No, Serena!"
"Mr. Dragon said to. It's the best thing to do." Bruno's anger leaked onto their face, twisting Serena's brow into an uncharacteristic scowl of disapproval. "What if they're dead?" he demanded. "What if they're dead and we're just leaving them?" "Then they're dead," Serena replied, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. "If they're dead, they won't come back to life if we go back to see them. It's simple, right?" Bruno made another effort to assume control, but Serena stuffed him down again with ease. In this situation, she was deadly calm while his own emotions were running rampant. He was no match in terms of mental strength. "So you're just going to abandon them?" His inner voice was tinged with more than a little spite. "It's my job to protect you," Serena whispered. "If abandoning them protects you, then it's an easy peasy decision. There's no point getting mad about it." With that, she continued up the tunnel, listening as Ted called out orders to the rebels. Wherever this tunnel led, it seemed they finally had the best chance of making it there in one piece. As Nail staggered to his feet, he could feel a curtain of ash fall from his body. In the same way, soot clung to his eyelids as he opened them to get a good look at what exactly had happened. Devastation. Utter devastation. The fog wall in front of them had completely vanished, along with most of the swamp they had concealed. All that remained were flames, smokes, and corpses. So many lives had been snuffed out in an instant. He had no idea of the cause, but some kind of light had come down from the sky and ignited the fog that had filled the swamp. The explosion had been beyond anything he'd ever imagined, a monolith of flame that consumed the world around them. Even here, outside the fog, the hot winds blown by the detonation swept over the army, cooking skin and charring bone. Ew. The only reason Nail had survived was because of his guardian entity. With his Shamasen strings, he'd been able to lift up a barrier of stone and rubble to shield himself and those immediately around him from the blast. Even with that, though, it was a miracle he'd survived at all. What happened? The question raced anxiously through his mind. Had their enemy somehow caused this, or was it some kind of natural disaster? The answer wouldn't change the results, but he couldn't help but desire that knowledge. It was like he was trapped in a dark room, fumbling around for some kind of light. A senseless loss of human life. No matter the cause, that fact remained true. One of the scouts who had been standing next to Nail shakily rose to his feet, looking around in horror at the sea of dead and dying men around them. The young man blinked once, twice, as if he couldn't even register what was in front of him. "Sir," he mumbled, "what do we—" He didn't finish his question as an arrow struck him in the head before the last words could leave his lips. The shaft of the arrow sticking out of his eye socket, the man staggered backwards before collapsing to the ground, dead. For a moment, Nail could only stare numbly at the body. With so many around him dead, his brain could not possibly register another loss. But no, he couldn't stop. He still had duties to fulfill. With steady hands, he lifted up his shamisen and swung it fast as lightning, deflecting 2 more arrows aimed straight for his own face.
Oh no, this is the green he, isn't it?
He whirled around, back against the stone barrier he'd made, facing off as against his attackers. These weren't the rebels, these were another party entirely. They were clad in dark cloaks of leaf and branch, only the slightest slivers of faces visible through the gap between hood and cowl. Pitch-black crossbows and daggers clutched in their hands.
No.
3 of them were approaching him, 2 with crossbows, 1 with 2 daggers, while countless others of their ilk moved among the rest of the army, gutting down those too disoriented to respond. This would be a massacre among a massacre. After so many had just died, would they really have to suffer further losses? Nail lifted his guardian entity, ready to fight, only to falter for a single moment. He'd recognised a face among their attackers. Not one of the 3 approaching him, but one who was moving through the army, finishing off those who probably would have died anyway. The eyes he saw above that cloak, he'd seen them thousands of times before. He could never mistake them. Greener? He mumbled.
No! It's his GF!
No! Being Nail is fucking suffering.
It really is. You know, I mean, I know he works for, like, some shitheads and has done bad things, yada yada. I have to say all this so people don't think I'm a monster or whatever. But honestly, like, you can't help but feel sympathetic for him because he's got the whole honor angle. He's like the Wamu of Aetheral space.
Wamu! Awakened
Yeah.
masters.
It's so fucked up. He
Akamento
got
and
betrayed. He got betrayed by, like, his BFF since they were kids. Like, obviously, we know from her perspective, she was, like, kidnapped and she has her whole tribe and stuff, so we get that. But to him, it's like his best friend just, like, is gonna kill him. And that's sad. You know, it'd be really epic if they recruited him. They were like, Nails, you guys should, like, bring him into the fold. He's got his shamisen. It'll totally work out. That would be epic style, I think. Smile.
Well, we'll have to
All
see
right, well,
what
that's it
next time.
for... Yeah, that's it for 5.27. Thank you guys for
Also,
watching.
Jagran can now has the same kind of stand as Akamento.
Yeah, he has the ability to become... Wait, does this mean he can theoretically become someone else's guardian entity?
Not really, no.
Skipper summons him?
Quickly
God,
hack this
Adrian.
computer by stand.
Guardian entity, Jagran Adrian! He's like,
Hack the
I wish you
mainframe.
wouldn't. I can't do that! I'm not a hacker. Oh, it's so weird to me that he can't hack.
There's going to be like an
Because, like,
imposter Jagran, and it's a reveal because he starts hacking.
Hacking is like just problem solving, and that is like exactly what cogitants do. So that's why it baffles me, because like you don't really need to know like a bunch of fancy lingo and stuff. You just have to have basic programming knowledge.
He doesn't have
be
basic
really smart.
programming knowledge, unfortunately.
You can learn that in like 3 months. Come on,
He can't be
Jerome.
bothered.
I don't want to hack. Do you think gets really pissed off when he sees a hacker cogitant like making the stereotype worse or whatever?
I don't think he cares that much. It's just that it's like everyone thinks he can do it.
Right. Alright, well, hopefully my eating's not showing up on mic. Sorry, I needed to have a crunch.
That was you eating the dead. What are you doing?
Wait, I should be ending the episode.
Yeah.
Shit. Bye!
Bye.